Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and I think all of us have been watching with great interest some of the incredible cases all over the media these days. And we are really honored to have with us a very special guest. Rene Sandler is with us today. She's a criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor, licensed in the state of Maryland. And perhaps you've caught her on some other radio shows or TV channels. She's all over the media, and even CNN, Fox, MSNBC, 60 Minutes have featured some of the cases that she's tracked and been involved with. So, Rene, thanks for your time. How are you today?
Sure, doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you. Well, listen, we watch some of these cases and we kind of scratch our head, don't understand all the things that are happening, but I'm kind of curious, why in the world is O.J. back in court? What's that all about?
Well, O.J. Simpson is back in court because he is at the last step of any review of his sentence. And he's there before the court on what we call a post-conviction proceeding. So this is it for O.J., last chance to show whether or not he's entitled under the law to have a new trial and have his conviction set aside.
Wow. Now, he's saying that his attorney misrepresented him?
He's saying under the law and under the Post-Conviction Act that his attorney was ineffective. And what that translates to is under the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution that he believes he didn't get a fair trial. And what he's saying is that his attorney had a conflict of interest. The attorney was working for the media at the same time he was representing O.J. And O.J. didn't get good advice about whether or not to testify during his trial. And when you look at these things cumulatively, you look as to whether or not O.J.'s rights were violated as a criminal defendant facing trial under the Constitution. I have to say that O.J.'s case actually has some merit here.
Okay, I was going to ask you, so you think it may have some legs. So he said he didn't testify during his trial. You think that was wise in behalf of his attorney, or should they put him up on the stand?
That's a great question, and it's a question I face in all of my cases. And the overwhelming number of cases a defendant does not testify. And his silence or her silence can't be used against him or her. But that's the client's decision. That's the defendant's decision to make after advice of his counsel. If an attorney says, do not do this, do not testify, that's not the give and take that the Constitution requires. So if his attorney did not consult with him, did not provide adequate advice there, and was ineffective, that could be the basis for a post-conviction relief.
Amazing. After all of this, you almost have to chuckle. I mean, it's just been an incredible thing to watch. All right, so somebody had to get to him while he's in jail to say, hey, wait a minute, here's your chance and here's why. So obviously another attorney saw an opportunity here.
Yes, absolutely. Look, this is a high-profile defendant. This is somebody who has some resources left to be able to hire counsel who specializes in this. But let me say this about this process. Highly disfavored. Very, very, very small percentage of post-conviction cases are granted. Because think about what we're doing here. Years and years later, we're taking another look at a conviction where a jury found someone guilty or a judge found someone guilty. So they're highly disfavored. But if an attorney falls below that required constitutional standard of care, it will be granted. So what's interesting about O.J. is that an attorney who was a part of his defense team at the time of trial testified and corroborated Mr. Simpson about this other attorney.
Wow. Well, here we go again. That's all I can say. On a much more serious and sad, incredible trial was Jodi. We watched this thing and just kind of shook our head. It has to be almost psychopathic.
It's so horrific. There's so many words to describe it, but if the victim impact statements yesterday were so powerful and so persuasive to put her to death. And this is a very, very difficult case. And Jodi Arias claims that she wants to be put to death, but does she really? So we'll see what the defense does next week, and the jury will get the case next week and decide.
Their attorney pretty much, it appears that they saw the handwriting on the wall. I mean, they didn't put her up on the case, and they really didn't defend her.
I'm going to disagree with you on that.
Okay.
She was on the stand for 18 days. 18 days testifying. Now, when you strip it all down, I don't think the jury believed a single day of it. But she did testify for 18 days. I think these defense attorneys did what they absolutely could to do what they could with very little to work with, and a very, very difficult client. And where Jodi Arias gets convicted of first-degree murder and within an hour is giving an interview with a TV station and throwing her attorneys under the bus.
Yeah. Very
difficult client to manage.
Oh, boy. All right, now let's go to Ohio with the gentleman that kept these three women, for 10 years. Where is that case heading?
That case is headed right into our criminal system like every other case, where the attorneys are now assembled. They are protecting their clients, and they have entered a plea of not guilty. Now, people react to that because you hear the evidence in this case, absolutely tragic. It hurts all of us to see what happened here. But these defense attorneys are doing what they have to do to protect their client. But it's a long road down this criminal system. They will evaluate any mental health defense. They will evaluate the strength and weakness of the evidence of the case, and they'll defend their client. And it will be a very, very tough job.
The Gosnell trial, we watched that one. That was pretty interesting. And then he obviously made a deal to not go for an appeal for life. Is that typical?
It is typical in these big cases where a jury has spoken and where both sides feel that they got something, if you will, at the end of a case. He saved his own life. We are not going forward with the next phase. You have to wonder about the Jodi Arias case, too, whether or not we could see anything there. Highly unlikely, but not unusual in the Gosnell case, not at all.
Is there anything left in the Jodi Arias case that would give her life?
Only if this very, very aggressive, very passionate prosecutor for the state of Arizona would come to the table with these defense attorneys, and only if Jodi Arias wanted it to forego the sentencing phase and negotiate a result of life without the possibility of parole. There is absolutely no indication that this prosecutor would be willing to do that.
All right, so now she goes back before the same jury that has convicted her, and it seems pretty solid what the jury's attitude is.
Sure, and this is the third verdict for this jury. Guilt, we've already seen. Cruelty, we've already seen. And now we're waiting on life or death. So we'll see that next week.
Wow. What's going to happen to the Boston bomber?
Well, the recent news is just very, very distressing, with the note that he left suggesting that he, in fact, was a domestic terrorist. So that case, again, will move in a different path than, say, the Arias case or Gosnell in the federal system. And they will continue to develop evidence. It's a tremendous case. And continue to look at others as to whether or not anyone assisted before, during, or certainly we know after. But a very difficult case, and certainly those lawyers will be trying to save his life as well.
All right, I want to come back to that because wasn't it originally going to be tried in Massachusetts, or was it always going to be a federal case?
Well, in any state where there are federal components, there is the opportunity to be in a state court or federal court. But here, where we have compelling federal laws, terrorism, for example, that supersedes state law, so it must be in the federal court. The state possibility here, if you remember, these two carjacked an individual, hurt him, that could be a state charge. So you could see the federal case as well as a state of Massachusetts state court proceeding as well.
Wow. As a prosecutor, do you think the system works?
Wow.
Only when you win the case, right?
How much time do we have to talk about this? As a former prosecutor and as a current defense attorney and as a citizen, I have to hope and believe that it does. There are things that happen where we shake our heads, but I truly believe ultimately that justice prevails, no matter which side you're on. I do.
All right. Can you comment on what may or may not be happening on Capitol Hill with some of these? And I realize now they're somewhat in a committee questioning, but if they go to select committee and they're subpoenaed, I mean, that is kind of a form of court, isn't it?
It is. There are rules of procedure like we have in courts, formal rules, I should say, and with court compliance, if you will, like subpoenas, you must respond. But, you know, it's a unique beast, if you will. I mean, we've seen these subpoenas that have been issued and First Amendment protections and domestic protections and security issues for our country. So I think we'll be watching very carefully to see how that evolves and whether or not subpoenas are complied with.
All right, one last question. I'll have to let you go, but can you define for us in layman's terms perjury?
Perjury. Each state has a different definition, but in my state, for example, it's a prior under oath statement that a subsequent statement contradicts. So it's a lie under oath. You take the oath to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, and then there is some substantive evidence to show later that that statement was a lie or a current statement was a lie. Wow. So it's a lie under oath.
Wow. Rene, what an honor. Thanks for your comments. And as these things develop, we'll get you back because you simplify the problem, and I appreciate that so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, Rene, have a great day. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back, and our next guest today is Keith Davies, and he's the director of Rescue Christians, as well as director of Forum for Middle East Understanding, and the Waller Shubat Foundation, which we've had Waller on the program quite a few times. And he's a public speaker, and he talks about terrorism, its roots, and how to stop it. So, Keith, nice to have you with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Hey, first of all, give us an update on Rescue Christians. What is the organization? How do you operate?
Rescue Christians we founded a couple of years ago as a sister ministry to what we're doing. And the reason we started it because nobody else was doing this work, which shocked us. What happened was we got an email connection, and we hooked up with these people that were in trouble in Pakistan that needed help, and we checked out the case and found it was genuine. So we started to call the different organizations that we thought deal with this problem, and we found out that absolutely none of them were interested in actually helping these people.
Wow.
We were shocked.
Wow.
So I discussed this with Walid. I said, well, if they're not doing it, maybe we can leverage what we're doing and the fame that we've generated through the work that we do through Walid Shubat to raise some money and awareness and also to actually do something. So we formulated an organization. We actually were able to find people on the ground in Pakistan, where our focus of our work is at the moment, to actually do physical rescue of Christians. And last year we saved 500 people, about 100 families.
Wow.
And we're just a drop in the bucket of what we're doing on a minuscule budget of $100,000.
That's unbelievable. How risky is it?
Well, for us, it's not risky because we're in the United States, but it's extremely risky for the people that we work with. We can't give out their names for obvious reasons. We've had to have them themselves had to temporarily escape from the country because the authorities were after him for rescuing somebody that we rescued back at the beginning of the year. His name is Ryan Stanton. He's a 16-year-old Christian boy who was targeted. And what happened was he had a cell phone. He's from a middle-class family, and his friends are Muslim. They tried to make him become a Muslim, like convert him to Islam,
wow.
And he didn't want to convert. And so one day, they asked for his cell phone to borrow. They wanted to make a phone call, they said, to somebody else. And what they did was they put all these nasty, negative things about Islam on the phone and then framed him and reported him to the police, right? And it became a huge case. And so the extremists got hold of it, and they went to his house. They literally burned the house down. We managed to get the family out about half an hour before the house was burnt to the ground. And they had to move from place to place constantly for several weeks, and then eventually we were able to find a way to get him out of the country.
Can you share with us how you did that?
I wish I could, but if I did, it would compromise with doing it again.
Okay, I appreciate that. So what are some of the needs of your organization? How can people help you?
We have a website called rescuechristians.org, and you can donate right online there. You can set up a monthly donation, which we'd really appreciate. Any amount, per month is fine. We know that in the future that the whole of the Middle East, let me explain, the Christian community at the moment in the Middle East, right, is treated like the Jews were in the 1930s.
Wow.
And they're discriminated against. There's a tremendous amount of problems, especially in Pakistan and Egypt, and several other countries too. The problem is horrendous. Right now, when the Caliphate, which people are updated with the Caliphate, which when Turkey takes over the Middle East, the Muslim Brotherhood takes over the Middle East, we're seeing what's happening now in Egypt, and we're seeing what's happening right across the Middle East, in Syria and so forth. Eventually, the whole Middle East will come under the authority of Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, like it did back before World War I. And if you know the history, the Armenian Christians and the Chaldean Christians were murdered. The 2.2 million of them were murdered between 1915 and 1918. We believe that the whole 100 million Christian community, there'll be an attempted Holocaust on the whole community of 100 million when that happens over the next several years. So we're on a mission to raise as much money as we possibly can, to rescue as many as we possibly can, and even at billions of dollars, we're probably able to rescue at the most 1 million people ourselves, right, and the rest may perish or escape themselves. It's a tremendous problem that people don't talk about in our media, generally speaking, and they don't talk about even on the Christian media. You're one of the few that does, that has helped us with getting the word out about this problem.
I wonder, Keith, if we American Christians understand the meaning of persecution like you see it over there.
They don't. I mean, persecution is, when we think of persecution, we're talking about what we see here in the government, banning or forcing people to issue contraceptives or abortion, and which are terrible things in itself. But these people are literally being killed over there for their faith just because they're Christian, and we don't have that problem here, not yet, anyway.
So where are the hot spots?
Well, it's really all over, but, Egypt, Pakistan, Nigeria, Sudan, Iraq, Syria, I mean, literally, even Lebanon, the Christians are being literally massacred everywhere. I just give you examples. In the limited persecution of the 1930s of the Jews, well, today, 100,000 Christians will die this year from martyrdom. That's one Christian every 5 minutes.
Oh. Boy, we just don't get it. Wow. So you mentioned earlier that this is heading to some kind of a major conflict where possibly hundreds of thousands of Christians could be annihilated. It's hard for us to fathom.
Millions, hundreds of millions, tens of millions, not hundreds of thousands, tens of millions.
Unbelievable.
This is how bad it is. People, like with the same thing if you look at the Holocaust, the world ignored the plight of the Jews, right?
Yeah.
And 6 million died out of 9 million,
right,
in Europe. Right, we are on a scale, you can multiply that by at least 10 this time. And it will happen over the next 3 to 10 years. And we have a plan of action. Currently what we do over there is the name of the organization is Rescue Christians, the division of FSME, the Forum for Middle East Understanding. But we call the project in Pakistan the Raoul Wallenberg Project. If people know who Raoul Wallenberg, he saved 100,000 Jews in World War II in Hungary. And we name the effort in Pakistan after him because the work that we do over there is nearly identical to what he did. We provide safe houses, food, resources, legal help, and visas to get people out when we need to get them out, and so forth. So literally, it's virtually identical work as what Raoul Wallenberg did. And we have a guy over there who's the most unbelievable guy. I can't mention his name, but we codename him RW2, which stands for Raoul Wallenberg 2. So he literally does the same work as Raoul Wallenberg, and there's no recognition for him. We can't give you out his name.
Why are we afraid to call this opposition evil?
Political correctness. We don't want to deal with the. We don't. If you don't deal with it, if you don't know about it, you don't have to deal with it.
Right.
And people just. It's like willful ignorance. It's the same issue. For example, if we expose the real issue of what's happening to Christians in Muslim countries, then we have to deal with the problem of that Islam may not be a peaceful religion. And that's not something that we can talk about.
Well, it's not. I mean, we're seeing it, but in this country, we're trying to do everything to defend it, and yet it's killing us. I don't understand this.
Well, we have not enough Americans have died yet. But see, that's the problem. It's like it's sad to say, and I hope it never happens. But we're not going to really deal with this until maybe 1 million Americans die of this. A nuke goes off in a big American city, and hundreds of thousands of Americans get killed. That's when we'll wake up. But other than that, we're not going to. 3,000 were killed in 9/11. It didn't seem to wake us up enough.
All right. So, Keith, how people get a hold of you and help you?
Yeah, we have two websites, shubat.com. We have a website called rescuechristians.org. Right, it's a one-page fill-out form, and you can select any amount of money you'd like to help us with, and also you can set up a monthly donation as well and cancel it at any time.
Rescuechristians.org or shubat.com?
Correct.
Okay.
Either one, both goes to the same place when you donate.
Well, our prayers are with you, my friend. Thank you for what you do. God bless you. We pray for protection for you and your team, okay?
Thank you.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
All right. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel, and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Well, we're back, and well, ladies and gentlemen, sit down, because we have Bill Gallagher in the studio. It's been a while since we've had him around, and he's kind of a Southern Oregon wannabe icon.
Didn't take long, Perry. Did not.
First line I had to take care of.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, we love this guy. Pastor Bill Gallagher's with us. He's a counselor, pastor, works at Trail Christian Fellowship, and also does, well, you do all kinds of things. You work with corporations?
Yes, I have a company called Teamworks, and I do mediation and team building and organizations, consulting, that kind of stuff.
Wow. Well, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm doing really good. I'm glad to be. I haven't been here since you had this lovely studio and you've been on TV.
Well, now you're a star.
A lot of progress.
Yeah. Yes. Send your tithe to theDove when you make all the
I leave this place and things really start happening.
Well, good to have you with us. We do need to talk about a serious topic, and growing through divorce workshop. Is this a course you teach? What is this?
Yeah, this is a weekend workshop that I've been teaching for years to help people process through the difficulty and the heartbreak of divorce. And
all right, so who, what, where, and when? Where do they go?
Well, this is going to be at Trail Christian Fellowship the weekend after Memorial Day weekend, so in 2 weekends.
Okay.
It starts Thursday night, which should be 2 weeks from tonight, Thursday evening, Friday evening, and then a Saturday morning. And we do a variety of subject matter, and we bring in a Christian attorney to help answer some questions. It's very, very practical.
Boy, you know, there was a time in Christendom we didn't even touch this.
Yeah, that's right.
And now it's common.
Yeah.
And how are you processing it?
Well, I tell you what, it's very difficult. You know, statistically speaking, we hear stats these days that there's as many divorces in the church as out, and it's probably close to being accurate. Right. Have you heard that one?
Well, I've heard it even 1% higher. You know,
it very well could be.
It's way up there. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And I believe that if there's any organization or group of people that should be competent and compassionate enough and skilled enough to walk with those divorced, it should be the church,
right?
The body of Christ.
All right, so there's two things here. Our roles of those supporting those who are going through it, and then those who are going through it, especially if they didn't want it. I mean, it's just
where it really rips on you.
Where your personal Christian conviction comes down over the top. You don't want this, you want to work it out, but maybe the partner says, I'm done, I'm out of here. Yeah. I mean, it just leaves you really torn, doesn't it?
Yeah, I went through that myself. Matter of fact, interestingly enough, 12 years ago today, ironically, I was walking across a parking lot at a local school, picking up my son from soccer practice. He was the age of 7, and a kind elderly gentleman approached me with an envelope. It was a divorce decree 12 years ago today. So it was very unwanted from my standpoint, and that's true. Usually those that have been left or abandoned struggle with it the most.
All right, so what do you do in this course? How do you start? What is the content?
Well, basically, the first session I talk about handling the loss, the emotions and the loss of divorce, and going through that whole grief cycle, so to speak, which is a real tough one to get through. But people identify instantly, and there's a variety of people at different stages of this loss and grief, and so I talk about the reality of that. Then I move on to dealing with the ex-spouse. Very, very important information.
Especially if there's children involved.
Especially if, most likely if there are children involved, you have to deal with it. And that's one of the differences between this type of loss than death. This one doesn't go away if there's kids involved. Even if they're up and out and past 18, there's graduations, there's births, there's anniversaries, there's death. And so it's very critical to learn how to build that relationship and things to not do with your ex-spouse.
Can you return to some kind of a civil discourse?
Yes, as a matter of fact, that would be, I mean, obviously the best case scenario is to follow God's plan and have a husband and wife that love the Lord, that raise their kids in a godly home where there's conflict but there's forgiveness. The second best situation would be if the people have to get divorced, they at least get along as ex-spouses in a civil way. It takes time to get there, though.
Yeah, especially if there's been a lot of hurt.
Yeah.
How do you deal with anger?
Well, I think anger is just a part of the grief cycle. And so, you know, God just has hardwired into all of us these stages of grief. Anger's one of them. And so I think one of the first ways to deal with it is to recognize that it's going to happen. You're not losing your mind. It is a part of dealing with loss. Now, it's a different case if it leads into resentment and bitterness. That's when we get a little bit concerned. But anger is normal. One should be angry by going through this divorce.
Now, part of this process, well, let me back up and say this. I don't know of a divorce where children were involved where the kids came out okay.
It is so rare. I was talking with my wife Jenny this morning. I've been happily remarried over 9 years. You know Jenny, great marriage. But we were just talking about this morning, that it is very, very rare that children are not scathed by a divorce. The higher percentage really struggle for many, many years to come.
And it shows up later in life.
Shows up later in life.
Now, the other thing that we're finding out is that the kids also become the pawn of revenge. How do we avoid that?
Oh, that's horrible, Perry. You know, when people do go through divorce, they have to watch a 2-part video series done at the courthouse, which has a lot of very good concepts on what not to do with your kids. And one of the very things they say is never put that child in the middle. And so I encourage parents. Matter of fact, one thing I say in the workshop is the spouse that bad mouths their ex in front of their children are almost assuring that that child will end up in their ex-spouse's arms. It's almost a given.
All right, you're the first person to admit that. I've always said that.
Yeah,
I've always said, you know, and look, I'm not trained like you. I have no experience in this, but I have helped people through this process, and I have seen the one that has bad-mouthed the spouse in front of the children, that when the children came of age to make a decision, they went with the other one.
Absolutely. I promise you, folks, if you bet, and it doesn't matter if your ex-spouse is a drug addict, it doesn't matter if they had an affair, it doesn't matter if they're angry at God, you bad-mouth, because they see it totally different. That's your ex-spouse. That's their mommy or daddy. They cannot make that transition. And so it's almost a given that if you badmouth your ex-spouse in front of your children, you are opening the door for them to go live with them someday. Don't do it.
All right. Now, what is the role of the supporting Christian in the church of a couple that's going through a divorce?
Well, generally when a couple goes through the divorce in the church, they don't stay in the same church, because that's very confusing to the children and to the church, depending on the type of divorce it is. I believe the role should be to walk with them, and even if it was an unbiblical divorce, still yet to walk with them. We're all sinners, we're all broken, we all have seasons of rebellion, and so for whatever the reason, unless they went against the leadership's counsel and the clear instruction of God's Word, and were in utter rebellion and did what we pleaded with them not to do, then that may take on a different type of support, if you know what I mean. But we should get alongside these people. And, you know, the churches that do really well are churches that, like, help the single mom and, you know, help her with child care and, you know, tell her to go away for the weekend and they'll watch their kids or bring in meal, you know, the church should be supportive. Absolutely.
Bill, we're seeing more, if I can use the term, unbiblical divorces.
Yes.
And I guess you can maybe fill in the blanks there. And they're going against the counsel of you, a counselor or a pastor, whatever. But something has clicked in them. They've made up their mind. This relationship is over.
Yes.
What do you do with that?
Well, first of all, the phrase, G. Campbell Morgan, who's one of my favorite commentators, you probably know that name, Perry, says that there's a guilty party and a non-guilty party. Now, what he means by that, because when there's a divorce, there's two guilty parties. Nobody's perfect in marriage.
You got two sinners last time.
You got two sinners. Last time we checked, yeah. What he means by a guilty party and a non-guilty party is that the guilty party is divorcing in the face of God's will. So there's not immorality, there's not desertion of an unbeliever. Those are the two biblical things. And there's some unwritten things like heavy...
What do you do with that? I mean, you know a person is violating God. I mean, that is like...
Well, I just, you know, I warn them not to do it. I mean, I've gone as far, and this was years ago, I've gone as far to say to men in particular, but this is not limited to men, of course, that just brazen, had an affair, didn't care about throwing the kids under the bus. They felt they were doing the right thing. I've gone as far as to tell spouses that have left under those conditions that they could die lonely people. Their kids may not be around your deathbed. That's the devastation of a brazen, unbiblical divorce. So G. Campbell Morgan says an unbiblical divorce, or the guilty party, is the one that leaves out of God's will.
Where's spiritual conviction in this?
Well, you know, especially, Perry, I would say the higher percentage of people that look their ex-spouse or their spouse and their children right in the eyes and say, I'm going to do this anyway and I'll take the risk. Usually there's an affair. There's a third person involved. And so there's no conviction. When a person gets to that place, they're in literal spiritual deception and they cannot see. Everything they taught their kids from the way up is turned on its head. Everything that they lived before their family is in total contradiction to the behavior, and they can't see. Actually, Chuck Swindoll calls it a period of temporary insanity.
Yeah.
And so there is no conviction at that point.
Okay. Do churches or ministries push recovery too fast? In other words, all right, the divorce has occurred, we want to get you back on track, smooth this thing over, and let the consequences of divorce maybe show up over here somewhere, behind us.
Get them to reconcile too fast?
No,
or to...
Just get the whole pain of divorce behind us too fast.
Yes, probably. You know, I would say one of the biggest mistakes is getting people to just praise the Lord and be joyful, like right away. Like, what kind of Christian are you? Christians aren't supposed to be depressed. Perry, this is a 2 to 6 year process minimum for people, depending on the closeness or the tenure of their marriage, to get past.
Yeah, but you see them get married within a year.
Yeah, and 87% of those get divorced again. 87% of people that get remarried within 2 years get divorced again, almost 9 out of 10 people. Because they haven't taken time to process all this hurt and pain. They haven't taken responsibility for where they went wrong. Sometimes that takes years to get to that. So, yeah, the ones that rebound do not do well. It's a very sad statistic.
All right, we're talking to Bill Gallagher. He's here today. There's a growing through divorce workshop coming up out at Trail. Give us the details on that again. Oh, here it is, right here. It's going to be Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's May 30th through the 1st of June, and it'll be out at Trail. That's a Thursday evening, a Friday evening, and a Saturday morning. And contact the church. Bill?
Yes, phone number is 541-878 or 3501. 541-878-3501, or they can actually register online at trail.org.
All right, I want to start this. We may have to pick it up after the break here in a minute, but I want to deal with the act of forgiveness, because the Scripture says that healing will take place after a confession, not before. Forgiveness, you know. James 5 says, you know, call for the elders, anoint with oil, pray for one another, and confess your faults one to another, so that you may be healed.
Yes.
And when you've been hurt deep, real deep, it's easier to cover it up than to say, you know, I have some part of this is my responsibility.
Yeah.
I need to not only ask for forgiveness of my part of it, but I also need to forgive the spouse no matter what they've done to me, because how else, if you go out and take communion, I think you're in dangerous ground there.
Well, the truth of the matter is, if there's unforgiveness, you for sure are not ready for another relationship. The Lord wants you to deal with that anger and forgiveness before you ever can heal and move on, ever. However, you know, in that conversation with Jesus and Peter and Matthew, it's 7 times 70. Now, that's not like 490, you start deducting it out. It's infinite. Yeah. And you see, I have a thing in here about the myths of forgiveness that I talk about. The myths of forgiveness are that it's instantaneous, you absolutely do forget, and you only have to do it once.
Oh, no.
No, not even. So divorce is ongoing forgiveness. Maybe not for the initial divorce, but there's ongoing, especially if there's kids, dealing with the ex-spouse, there's ongoing injustice, you know. So it's a lifelong forgiveness.
All right, Bill Gallagher's with us. We're going to talk about this coming up after the break. And again, you may want to get a pencil and paper so you can write down. If you've gone through this or you're in the middle of this, this may be very helpful for you with a workshop coming up at the end of the month. We'll give you the details when we come back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
All right, we're back with Pastor Bill Gallagher. He's a pastor and a counselor and one of the associate pastors at Trail. He counsels people and has a little company called Teamworks, and he works with organizations on internal conflicts.
Yeah, just the relational side of the organizations, team building, building morale, dealing with conflict, mediation, stuff like that.
You sure you don't want me to take over that company? I think you can solve everything with food.
You probably. Well, you know what? The Bible kind of says that too. Break bread together, come together. Food is a healer. It really is.
Yeah, we do everything with food here.
Yeah.
See all the stains
I noticed.
On the floor?
Well, they do too. I've gained weight since I started at Trail. I keep telling them.
Really?
You know, we dinner, lunch, most of us every day together as a staff.
I'm a firm believer of that. I'm a firm believer of that. All right, we're talking about growing through divorce workshop coming up with Pastor Bill. It's going to be Thursday, May 30th, and then Friday, and then Saturday. So that's Thursday evening, 6:30 to 9, Friday evening, 6:30 to 9, and then Saturday morning from 9:30 until noon. And you can call the church and get registered, 541-878-3501. That's 541-878-3501. And dealing with handling of the loss, dealing with an ex-spouse, the challenge of single parenting, the do's and don'ts of helping your children cope, forgiveness, which we kind of highlighted, getting your life in order, do you have a future, and establishing healthy relationships, dating again, remarriage, and all that. Man, you cover it all.
Well, and a new feature that we've got just last week is we have a Christian attorney, Jamie Haslett, who's coming in at the end of the last session to do question answer, and that is very, very critical for a lot of people at this stage.
All right. When in the process, as the counselor, do you begin to deal with the individual on the subject of forgiveness?
Well, I talk to them realistically. I have a grief chart. I wish I had it for you here, Perry, but there's if you can just imagine a circle here. You have a loss of divorce, so let's say it was 6 months ago. Okay. Well, then there's these stages that a physician, Kubler-Ross, you've probably heard her name in the 60s, talk about the grief cycle. Right. And the natural stages are, of course, shock and denial and anger and depression and self-pity, and then acceptance over here. So what I do is I tell them that that's where they're headed, but I do not push that on them too soon. They have to process anger. They have to wrestle with the Lord on the forgiveness matter, because here's what happens. A lot of believers, as we said earlier, think that it's a one-shot instantaneous forgiveness, and then they just jump over to acceptance, and they don't go through the stages, and a year or 30 years later it starts coming up through the cracks.
Yeah,
and they want to know why they're just depressed 20 years later for no reason.
Wow.
Because they didn't process it. So I talk about forgiveness right away, but realistically speaking, it takes time sometimes.
All right, I realize this is theological and everybody's convictions are a little bit different, but do you possibly recommend sustaining communion during that time until the forgiveness process is completed?
I don't think I would take it that far, because I think right in the context of communion is a perfect opportunity to work that out with the Lord.
Okay. All right. Now, you got so many things here. Somebody thinks their life is over. The future's done. They're penniless. They're hopeless. They're now got all this pressure on them. How do you get them to have faith again?
Well, the Word of God is the only place we can go to truly find faith and hope. The theme of the divorce is there's hope after divorce. That's my theme. And, you know, Jeremiah 29:11 is true. Behold, I have a plan and a future for you, to restore you, not to harm you, paraphrase. And so God's Word is the only place that we can truly offer hope. Divorce is not the end of our life. And furthermore, one person, to say my life is over because one person is gone, is to give way too much power to an individual. The Lord's much more purposeful and powerful than that.
Have we made divorce too easy?
Absolutely. And what I think, Perry, and I'm sure you're going to agree with me on this, is unfortunately, maybe in the last 20 years, the whole phrase or the whole term emotional abuse has gotten way too much press.
Oh, boy.
And way too much support from the church as a reason for divorce. It's wrong. It's wrong. Now, there's different levels, of course.
Yeah.
We're not talking about beatings.
But that has to be qualified legitimately.
Yeah, and it's emotional abuse is hard to measure. How do you measure it? Every marriage has seasons of
abuse
emotion.
At the airport yesterday.
There you go. There you go. So how do you measure emotional abuse?
Yeah.
Men could say they're emotionally abused too.
Yeah.
Women say it all the time, and so you can't measure it. So it's a crutch. It's not a reason for biblical divorce.
When do you deal with the subject of remarriage? Do we push this too fast as Christians?
Yeah, I think so. Once again, minimum of 2 years to even start to. Well, I took the divorce care at the Nazarene Church one time. That's a 15-week course. Mine's more condensed in a weekend. Okay. And they say, I believe, for every year that you've been married, you wait 4 years.
Oh, well, then you never get remarried again.
No, for every year it's 4 years. So if you were married 20 years, then you don't even start dating for 5 years. Oh. That's what they would say, or get remarried for 5 years.
All right, so the dividing component is 4.
Is 4.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and especially if Dr. Laura, who has some great advice, a little abrasive, but some really good advice. I really didn't like her talk show for a long time because she said, do not get remarried until the children are all out of the house. Yeah. Jenny and I got remarried. We had a blended family. And by the way, our dear friend Kevin Lehman, the title of his book, Families Don't Blend, They Collide, he's telling you the truth. Yeah. I now agree with Dr. Laura. So if you have kids, wait.
You know, it's so interesting you say this. I worked with a pastor friend of mine, not in the state, and his wife just got up one day and said, life's over, I'm leaving. I mean, it was, you probably have dealt with it. As far as we know, it was just complete mental breakdown or something, gone. 2 children involved. And he's waited 14 years because he said, I'm going to create a stable home. Yep. I'm a pastor of a church. The church walked with him. I'm going to create a stable home for those kids, and I'm not even going to think about it until they're gone and in college. Wise man. Yeah.
Jenny and I, as I said, we're happily married, and we blended 5 together, 3 that were still at home, teenagers. I mean, when we came home from our honeymoon, it was really over because we came home to 3 teenagers. It was over. But we now say that we should have waited longer. And we waited almost 3 years. We dated for 2.5 years. And we're saying we probably should have extended, because of our kids, we probably should have even extended it longer.
All right, so why is the church so anxious to get this person remarried? Do you think that the marriage is the healing balm of the problem?
It could be, and one of the myths of divorce and remarriage is that after divorce, a lot of people think that a remarriage will cure them, and it doesn't. It takes a long time to stop hurting, even if you have a good marriage. So I don't know if that's the reason. Maybe you know, they feel that they're struggling. A lot of single parents want to get married because they need help. Some people get remarried because they struggle with temptation and sexual issues. You know, I don't think it's the greatest motivation, but it is a motivation. So I say there's no hurry.
All right, but so often the case is that when a divorce occurs, say within the church, the spouse that is left, the supporting church is, you know, with this side, and they try to get them healed and ongoing, and they realize, all right, this person's mistake, and they're gone and all that, but they never come back to the person who remains and say, wait a minute, part of the divorce is really your responsibility too.
Yes.
It may be very minor, but there is some issues there.
Absolutely.
Okay. Have we dealt with those issues before they take them into the next?
That's why I say you don't want to rebound, because it takes time to see exactly where you went wrong. Because here's what happens. If they move too quickly and haven't taken responsibility or have not really healed well, and they get remarried, guess what? The same stuff comes up inside of them, and they go, oh, I thought it was just going to be my first. I'm dealing with this again. So what I tell the people in my classes, don't move too quickly, because the biggest problem of moving too quickly in rebounding is you bring yourself with you. That's the biggest problem.
Yeah. Wow. So how do you help somebody just kind of get the, I mean, the world just blew up. How do you prioritize things again?
Well, if they have children, the focus all of a sudden begins with becoming the best single parent they can for their children. I said nothing else matters anymore but your relationship to the Lord and your children. You be the best single dad you can be. You be the best single mom you can be. It is all about them. That is your ultimate responsibility. So that's my first goal. And then try to get them, of course, to find some support. There's a couple of divorce care groups at the Nazarene Church, starting in the fall again. Table Rock has one. Find a good support group. You can walk with people. Just get around some healthy friends, you know.
We're going to run out of time here, but what do you do with the person who feels like God let them down? They prayed not to get a divorce, but they got one.
I validate them.
How?
I say, I can see why you feel that God let you down. I can see why emotionally you feel abandoned by the Lord at this time. I can see that. I understand that. But then gradually work with them and say, you know, those are about your feelings, but it has nothing to do with God's relationship with us. He tells us differently. So he seems very silent, but that doesn't mean he's gone.
All right, the workshop's coming up Thursday, May 30th, Friday, May 31st, and Saturday, June 1st. Thursday and Friday will be 6:30 to 9, and then Saturday morning 9:30 to 12. Bill Gallagher is going to be hosting it, and it's out at Trail. 878-3501 is the way to get registered.
Yes, and they can go online to trail.org actually and can register right online.
Well, thanks for what you do. I'd like to have come in and do some more conflict resolution within organizations.
Would love to.
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Good
Thanks,
to see you,
Perry.
man.
Good seeing you. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.